And now Work Matters with Julie Mann.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to that show that ponders the big question, does work matter? And if it does, why? On this show, we explore topics that are important to creating that work that matters. And today, we're going to explore the topic of talent, and yes, more talent, because we've got a talent struggle out there, and we want to talk about that and kind of get a little bit more insight. So on the show today, joining me is Joe O'Connor. And Joe is the CEO of a company called Vizi, and they're located in the Troy, Michigan area. And it's really fascinating because, you know, that's where Joe spends his time. So he's entrenched in this topic. And I have to tell you, I'm just absolutely thrilled to have him with us today. So Joe, welcome to Work Matters.
Thank you very much, Julie.
I'm glad to have you here. And so I think what we're going to do is just kind of like jump in because, you know, I kind of like prefaced in the beginning that talent struggle. So from your opinion, and again, from your insight, help us understand, you know, what is the talent struggle? Is it real? What's kind of happening out there? So if you'd start there, I'm pretty sure we'll find some other questions to talk about for the segment.
Sure thing. Thank you. So I think there's no doubt that it's real, and you just have to talk to any employer in our Michigan environment or nationally, and we hear about the struggle that people are having. And I think that for any number of reasons, the least of which is not COVID, that candidates have really stepped back and sort of reassessed and reevaluate what they're doing, and they realize that they spend a lot of time at work. And I think that the result of that introspection is that candidates are figuring out that they want to be much more selective in terms of where they work, and it isn't just a matter of duties and responsibilities anymore. They're looking carefully at what companies represent, what they stand for, their values, their culture, et cetera. And so it's a different evaluation by the candidate. It's much more selective, and I think that's why it's a changing landscape and therefore more challenging for a lot of employers.
Yeah, you know, I was talking with somebody the other day, and I've been doing this thing called HR for quite a while. I'm the official HR geek, self-professed, by the way. But you know, we used to talk a lot about work-life balance, and that was, you know, there were so many articles out there about work-life balance, and you know, from an HR practitioner standpoint of view, we would talk about that as well. And I've kind of started using the phrase life-work balance. Because we're just, you know, from again, what's creating some of that talent struggle on both sides, right? For the candidate, where they want to be, and for the employers on how do they attract, is that, you know, we've got a little bit of a different lens. What do you think about that?
Well, I think that's entirely true. And, you know, if we step back and just look at things objectively and look at the history of what has been called talent acquisition, you could argue that even what it is called is wrong, because acquiring something is much different than wanting to sort of attract somebody to do something. And so I think we are moving very quickly to having to focus much more on selling and marketing in this process of attracting talent than was previously the case. And I think, again, it gets back to the candidate's mindset. And if you think about it, much of the talent acquisition process is very transactional by design. And if you look at job boards or even people's career sites and just how it's all been formulated, it's very transactional by design. And from a candidate standpoint, a career choice is a very important life choice. Mm-hmm. And that is anything but transactional. And I think that is a significant difference in terms of how candidates are approaching this and how employers must respond, because people are recognizing that, and you could argue that even where you work and where you spend your time at work is maybe among the most important life choices that you make, because it's so critical to all the other important life choices in terms of income and how you balance your work-life effort, et cetera. So I don't think it's a small change. I think it's a significant change that we're experiencing right now.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, I would completely agree with that. And I think, you know, even if you look at, you know, turnover, you can cut a million different ways, right? But I think, you know, there's chunks of turnover, and I'll say that from the listener who has the job, who leaves a job, and from the company that's measuring the amount of people who are leaving the company, right? So that's what we kind of talk about, turnover. But when you think about turnover, a lot of it is just that if it's near-term turnover, like 6 months to a year, kind of like right when you get the job, is that you didn't put the storyboard together right. You didn't really have a realistic preview of what the job was, or the job didn't match your expectations. And I think that goes back to, you mentioned it a few minutes ago, is that branding and kind of that storytelling of not only the company, but of the roles.
Yeah, I think that's entirely true. And, I think, again, that people are interested in understanding what the environment's going to be like, exactly what the job is. One of the things that I've hired a number of people over the years, and what I try to be very careful to do is to indicate and make clear what it is and what it isn't. Mm-hmm. And I think that type of candor and that type of honesty is very, very helpful and can eliminate, issues later on. And now more than ever, a candidate wants to find an environment and a situation where they can understand clearly what the job is and what it isn't. So it's again, I think it's just part of that extended selective practice that we're seeing with candidates now.
So do you think, so let's kind of go back to, kind of that jumping off point about talent. So, I've been doing HR for a long time, and it seems like we've been using the phraseology of the war on talent for a long time, right? That was maybe more the phrase in the 90s. I don't know if I had to pick a time frame. And now, we're still in that struggle space, let's say. So my question is, do you think that the struggle is more, less? Like where's the trend line in your opinion? Is it increasing, flat, decreasing? If you kind of looked over the past 10 years, maybe?
Yeah, I think it's definitely, I think the struggle is much greater than ever. And I don't know how temporary it is. People seem to think, they're going to find a light at the end of the tunnel that might restore things more closely to where they were a few years ago. But I'm not sure about that. I think it's a mindset that has changed and evolved over a period of time. And I don't think, again, I think about the original phrase of talent acquisition, and it's almost like you're buying a commodity, and that's just not the case anymore. And it is definitely, if you consider a buyer and a seller, it's a buyer's market right now in terms of where the candidate wants to be and what the employer can provide. And the other thing is, there doesn't seem to be an environment like I have to get a job before I quit my current job.
Right.
It's very different in that sense. So that we could call that, more a greater sense of security or more confidence. But there's definitely a different mindset than ever, and I don't think it happened overnight. I think it's been evolving, and people are just much more particular about where they're going to spend their time when it comes to where they're going to work.
And do you think that the pandemic accelerated that?
I think it did because, first of all, things were remote. Mm-hmm. I think people had more time to reflect on things. I think they start to decide what are their priorities, and that issue of work-life balance becomes clearer in view. I think the fact that they spent more time in their home, potentially with their kids, influenced all of that. So I'm not sure that there wasn't an undercurrent of this, but I think the pandemic was an absolute catalyst to spark much more of this thinking and evaluation and assessment in terms of lifestyle and life preferences.
Mm-hmm. So what do you see companies doing? So, you're in the, I'm not going to call it the talent acquisition space. I think that's actually a great phrase. I might have to borrow that one from you if you don't mind, Joe.
Sure.
Okay. All right. Thank you. So I'm going to borrow that one. But, you're in that space where you're interacting with companies all the time on, attracting talent. So what do you see that companies are doing differently? Like, how are they? You mentioned branding earlier, and I think branding is essential. And I think one of the things that I'm seeing more is that people just have to really have that be a focus point. It's not something that is a result of, right? It has to be a planned activity, because otherwise you don't brand enough, right? And I know probably about a year ago I was saying to people, I'm like, you can't just start branding when all of a sudden you need to, right? It's got to be kind of a part of who you are. because then, it takes a while for that to, 3 to 6 months for people to kind of get the message, right? So, but what are you seeing companies doing kind of differently as they're kind of coming into this, again, the new talent struggle, let's call it?
Yeah, well, Julie, from all your experience that, one of the greatest sources for finding great talent is leveraging your own employees to accomplish that. Interestingly, that hasn't changed. In fact, it might even be more important today. And I think that what we see is that companies are trying harder through employee testimonials and through videos that are employee testimonials and to basically try to convey, again, what their employees think of their company and their opportunities, et cetera. And, that's the essence of employer branding. And then there are creative ways to do that. And part of that has been more visual, more video. Mm-hmm. And I think it isn't just polished marketing. And what we see that works best is a balance that is more authentic. So, for example, there could be things borrowed from a company's social media sites that incorporate, their employees at work being real, looking authentic. And I think, again, it isn't just a polished marketing approach to employer branding, but rather a balance that is going to be genuine. And I think the candidates really respond well to that because it's real.
Yeah, that's actually really good insight because it is, if you think about I'm going to go to the visual side, right? If you think about the visual side and I know this from my kids, right? But all the Instagram and the YouTube and just the visual influence that we all have more and more these days because of this little black thing we keep in our hands all the time or whatever color it might be, kind of transitioning to both that visual as well as, I think there's, I always have thought that one of the, the greatest abilities from a leadership standpoint of view is good storytelling. And that goes back to the beginning of time, right? And we've known that for many years, but we haven't incorporated that as much because it's that storytelling that really gets, to that piece, like you said, about authentication and, company presence, if you want to say.
Yeah, I agree totally. And if you think about it and you look at things objectively, we are using the same document that we used 80 years ago as the primary dependency to attract people, and it's called the job post or the job description, and they all look alike because they are alike. Mm-hmm. And so it's very hard to compete when everything is the same. And obviously, I think that's what's beginning to change. There's a lot of emphasis on recruitment marketing and employer branding, as you indicated.
Yeah.
So it's interesting that with all the change in mediums that we've all experienced over the last 25 years, that dependency on the text-based job description has remained the same.
Well, I'll tell you, I just had a discussion, and it was actually this week, with a group of HR folks. And my challenge to that group was, I've been doing HR for a long time, but the challenge was, if you think about so many aspects of HR, and, just to go outside of the talent space for a minute, and even if you think about it, I'm a listener, right? There are so many things about when you interact with your HR arena that have not changed, like, forever. I mean, the job description hasn't changed. The essence of the recruiting process hasn't changed. Okay, maybe it's Zoom more, but, the essence of kind of the process, the essence of performance management hasn't changed. So there's all of these different kind of pockets of HR. And when I was talking to this group this week, my comment to them was, you have the capability to take everything that is in your niche specialty area from an HR function and pretty much blow it apart and figure out what does new look like. And we're in that great space, I think, historically, from a functional standpoint of view. And here you go, I'm on my soapbox. You can tell I love what I do. But we're really in that neat space where we've got the ability to look at every single thing we do and really kind of push the needle and say, is this the way we want to continue to do it? Does it make sense? How can we do it differently? And I think we're going to see a lot of neat opportunities just in the function of HR to interact and engage differently. So I think that's I find that pretty darn interesting. So.
Agree. Totally.
Yeah. So, all right, Joe. Well, tell you what, I am going to. We're gonna do another segment. So anybody listening, we're gonna talk some more about this. So we're gonna wrap it up right now. But please join us back, Joe. Thank you so much for joining us and talking about the talent struggle. It's real, and we're all experiencing it one way or the other, whether we're looking for a job or we're trying to hire people. So, everyone that's listening, thanks so much. And as we always say, let's transform today. Let's have an impact on tomorrow. And until next time, let's make work matter.